In 2017, one of television's most trusted faces fell from grace in a single day. Matt Lauer had spent over 2 decades waking up America on the Today Show until allegations of sexual misconduct forced NBC to fire him in minutes. But here's what most people don't know. His downfall wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning of something darker. Years later, he's still fighting battles nobody sees, living in exile while his accusers speak out. And the real question isn't what happened to Matt Lauer. It's whether anyone can truly survive this kind of public destruction. Matt Lauer didn't just host the Today Show. For 20 years, he was a Today Show. Every morning at 7 a.m., millions of Americans woke up to his face. He interviewed presidents. He sat with celebrities. He made people laugh. He made people cry. And America trusted him completely. But trust is a currency. And in 2017, Matt Lauer's ran out. Before the scandal, before the accusations, before everything fell apart, Lauer was untouchable. He earned $20 million a year. He had a penthouse apartment in New York. He was married with 2 kids. He had the kind of career most people only dream about. The kind of life that looks perfect from the outside. The kind of life where nothing could go wrong. Here's what people forget. The most powerful people in television aren't the ones you see on screen. They're the ones behind the scenes. Lauer didn't just read the news. He controlled the newsroom. He decided who got interviewed. He decided what stories mattered. And in a workplace, that kind of power changes everything. For 2 decades, nobody questioned him. Not really. Sure, there were whispers. There were rumors. People in the industry knew things. But the whispers stayed quiet. The rumors never made it public. And Matt Lauer kept waking up America, kept smiling at the camera, kept pretending everything was fine. Then something shifted. In October 2017, the hashtag #MeToo movement was gaining momentum. Harvey Weinstein had just been exposed. Kevin Spacey was falling from grace. Suddenly, women everywhere started speaking up about the men in power who had hurt them. And suddenly, the whispers about Matt Lauer got louder. NBC started investigating. Quietly at first, then seriously, then urgently. What they found would shock the nation and change television forever. On November 29, 2017, Matt Lauer went to work like any other day. He had no idea it would be his last. That morning, NBC received a detailed complaint from a former colleague. A woman who had worked with Lauer years earlier came forward with allegations of sexual misconduct. She wasn't alone. As NBC's investigation deepened, more voices emerged from the shadows. More stories, more accusations. Each one adding weight to a narrative that NBC executives could no longer ignore. By afternoon, the decision was made. At 8:40 p.m. that same day, NBC's chairman sent a memo to staff. Matt Lauer was fired, effective immediately. No 2 weeks' notice. No goodbye tour. No chance to say farewell to the millions of viewers who had trusted him for 2 decades. Just gone. Erased. Replaced by a substitute host before the next morning's broadcast. The speed was stunning. The finality was brutal. What made it worse was what came next. Within hours, the details started leaking. The accusations weren't vague. They were specific. They were disturbing. NBC released a statement acknowledging inappropriate sexual behavior in the workplace. Then the accusers themselves started speaking to reporters. What emerged was a pattern. Not an isolated incident, but years of alleged misconduct. One accuser described a sexual assault in a hotel room during the Sochi Olympics. Another spoke of unwanted sexual contact in his office. A third described a years-long pattern of harassment. Each story was different. Each story was devastating. And together, they painted a picture of a man who had used his power in ways that went far beyond inappropriate. The Today Show's co-hosts were blindsided. Savannah Guthrie and Hoda Kotb found out about Lauer's firing on air just minutes before going live. They had to compose themselves, sit down at that desk, and deliver the news to America that one of their own had been terminated for sexual misconduct. Millions watched in shock. Social media exploded. The news cycle consumed everything. Matt Lauer had been the face of morning television. Now he was the face of something darker, a symbol of unchecked power and the men who had hidden behind their celebrity for far too long. In less than 24 hours, his entire world had collapsed. His career was over. His reputation was destroyed. His name became synonymous with scandal. But the real question was, what happened to him next? The details that emerged in the days and weeks after Lauer's firing were damning, and they painted a picture that went far deeper than a single mistake or a moment of poor judgment. One of the first accusers to come forward was a woman who had worked as a production assistant on the Today Show. She described an encounter during the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi, Russia. According to her account, Lauer invited her to his hotel room under the pretense of discussing work. Once inside, the situation escalated. She alleged that Lauer sexually assaulted her. She reported feeling trapped, confused, and ashamed. For years, she carried that trauma in silence. But she wasn't the only one. Another accuser described a pattern of harassment that lasted years. She said Lauer would make inappropriate comments about her body. He would text her sexually suggestive messages. He would find excuses to be alone with her. When she tried to establish boundaries, the behavior continued. The power dynamic was impossible to ignore. She worked for him. He could make or break her career. Speaking up felt like career suicide. A third woman came forward with an even more disturbing account. She alleged that Lauer had sexually assaulted her in his office at NBC. She described feeling pressured, manipulated, and afraid. What struck many observers was how she described the aftermath. The shame, the self-doubt, the question that haunts many assault survivors. Would anyone believe me? The answer, it turned out, was yes. People believed her, and they believed the others. What made these accusations so powerful wasn't just the allegations themselves. It was the pattern. It wasn't one bad night. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was years of behavior. It was abuse of power. It was a man who knew exactly what he was doing, and did it anyway. NBC later acknowledged that the network had received complaint about Lauer's conduct years earlier, in 2017, before his firing. The complaint had come from a junior female staffer. And according to reports, NBC management had been aware of concerns about his behavior for some time. Yet Lauer remained on air. He remained in power. He remained trusted. That silence was a real scandal. Legal experts pointed out that Lauer had allegedly used his position to isolate victims, to create situations where they felt they couldn't say no, to make them question their own reality. This wasn't flirtation. This wasn't a gray area. This was predatory behavior dressed up as a powerful man's entitlement. And America was watching it unfold in real time, realizing that the man they had trusted every morning had been hiding a dark secret all along. Hers accused of sexual misconduct? How do you help them navigate a world where his name is synonymous with scandal? Lauer tried to maintain some connection to his children, but even that became fraught with difficulty. The legal battles mounted. In 2018, one of his accusers filed a lawsuit against him. Lauer's legal team fought back aggressively, but the court of public opinion had already rendered its verdict. He was guilty in the eyes of millions, regardless of what any court would ultimately decide. What's striking about Lauer's exile is how complete it was. He didn't try to stage a comeback. He didn't apologize and ask for forgiveness. He didn't write a book or do a tell-all interview. He simply vanished into wealth and privacy, cut off from the world that had once celebrated him. But silence, it turns out, is its own kind of punishment. While Matt Lauer disappeared into silence, the women who accused him stepped into the light. Their names became known. Their stories became public. And for the first time, they had a platform to tell the world what had happened to them. Not filtered through Lauer's lawyers, not softened by network executives, not silenced by fear of retaliation. One accuser gave an interview to Variety, one of the entertainment industry's most respected publications. She described how Lauer had used his authority to create situations where she felt powerless. She talked about the shame she carried for years. She talked about the self-blame that comes with being assaulted by someone powerful. And she talked about what it meant to finally be believed. "I was terrified," she said in one account. "I thought if I said anything, my career would be over." He was Matt Lauer. Who was I? That question, who would she compare to him, captured the entire dynamic. In a hierarchical workplace, especially in television, power isn't just about money or title. It's about access. It's about who gets heard and who stays silent. It's about who people believe. Another accuser spoke to NBC News about her experience. She described years of inappropriate behavior that escalated over time. She talked about how she had tried to avoid being alone with Lauer, how she had changed her work schedule to escape his attention, how she had internalized the blame for his actions. She also talked about something crucial. She wasn't the only one. Other women in the newsroom knew what was happening. There was an unspoken code of silence, a collective agreement to pretend everything was fine. Everyone knew, she said, but nobody said anything. That revelation was perhaps the most damaging of all, because it meant that Lauer's behavior hadn't been a secret. It had been an open secret. And NBC, despite its public image as a progressive news organization, had allowed it to continue. The accusers also talked about the aftermath of coming forward. One woman described receiving hate mail from Lauer supporters who didn't believe her. Another talked about the legal battles that dragged on for years, forcing her to relive her trauma repeatedly. A third spoke about the professional consequences, how speaking up had marked her as a troublemaker in an industry where silence was valued and loyalty to powerful men was rewarded. What made their account so powerful was their specificity. They weren't vague allegations. They were detailed, emotionally raw, and deeply credible. They painted a picture of a serial predator who had operated with impunity for years, protected by his status and the power structure of NBC. And they raised a question that many in the industry had confront. How many other Matt Lauers were still out there? How many powerful men were still using their positions to abuse and exploit? How many women were still staying silent? The accusers' willingness to speak publicly became a catalyst for change, not just at NBC, but across the entertainment industry. Their voices mattered, their stories mattered, and their courage in coming forward, despite the cost, mattered most of all. Years have passed since Matt Lauer's fall from grace, and the question that lingers is haunting. Can someone like him ever rehabilitate his image? Can he ever be forgiven? Can he ever come back? The answer, based on what we've seen, appears to be no. Lauer has remained largely silent since 2017. He hasn't attempted a public apology tour. He hasn't tried to rebuild his career in smaller markets or alternative media. He hasn't written a memoir or done a confessional interview. He has simply existed in the Hamptons, in private, away from the spotlight that once defined him. Some might argue that his silence is a form of acceptance, an acknowledgement that there is no path back. Others might see it as avoidance, a refusal to face what he's done or to engage with his accusers in any meaningful way. The truth is probably somewhere in between. What's fascinating is how different Lauer's fall has been compared to other high-profile men accused of misconduct. Some have attempted comebacks. Al Franken, the former senator, apologized and stepped down from office. Harvey Weinstein fought his accusers in court, but has largely disappeared from public life. Kevin Spacey has tried to mount a legal defense and maintain some presence. But Lauer has chosen near total silence. Perhaps he understands something that others don't, that some falls are too far to recover from, that some damage, once done, cannot be undone, that some reputations, once destroyed, cannot be rebuilt. The legal landscape has been complicated. While Lauer faced accusations from multiple women, he has not been convicted of a crime. The cases against him have either been settled, dropped, or remain in legal limbo. From a strictly legal standpoint, he hasn't been proven guilty in a court of law, but from a court of public opinion. The verdict was rendered long ago. This raises uncomfortable questions about power, accountability, and justice in America. Is public humiliation enough punishment? Is exile sufficient? Or does true accountability require something more, a legal reckoning, a formal admission of guilt, a genuine attempt at restitution? What's clear is that Matt Lauer's life has fundamentally changed. The man who once had everything, money, fame, influence, respect, now has none of those things except money. And money, as it turns out, can't buy back a reputation. It can't erase your name from the internet. It can't make people forget. It can't bring back the career you lost or the person you were before. The bigger tragedy might be this. We'll never know if Matt Lauer would have accepted responsibility if given the chance. We'll never know if he's capable of genuine remorse. We'll never know if, deep down, he understands the harm he caused. His silence ensures that those questions will remain unanswered forever. And perhaps that's the cruelest punishment of all, not knowing if redemption was ever possible. Matt Lauer's story isn't really about Matt Lauer. It's about something much larger. It's about power. It's about institutions. It's about the systems we build that protect powerful men and silence vulnerable women. For decades, television news operated like a closed ecosystem. The on-air talent, especially men, sat at the top of a rigid hierarchy. Below them were producers, reporters, and staff. At the very bottom were the most vulnerable, young women working as assistants or interns, desperate to break into the industry, willing to tolerate almost anything to climb the ladder. This power structure didn't create predators, but it enabled them. When a man like Matt Lauer had the ability to hire, fire, and control the careers of people beneath him, he had power that extended far beyond the newsroom. He had the power to determine who succeeded and who failed. He had the power to make or break careers. And he had the power to silence anyone who might speak against him, simply by threatening their livelihood. NBC knew this, or at least parts of NBC did, because the complaints about Lauer didn't emerge from nowhere in 2017. According to various reports, NBC executives had been aware of concerns about his behavior for years, yet they did nothing. Why? Because Matt Lauer was a Today Show. He was a cash cow. He generated hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. He was too valuable to fire, so the institution protected him. It enabled him. It allowed him to continue. This is a pattern that repeated across Hollywood, across news media, across corporate America. Powerful men got protected because they were profitable. Women who complained were dismissed, silenced, or forced out, and the system perpetuated itself. The hashtag #MeToo movement changed that calculus, at least temporarily. When multiple accusers came forward publicly, NBC could no longer ignore the problem. The reputational damage of keeping Lauer on air became greater than the financial loss of firing him. So he was terminated, but only because the equation had shifted, only because public pressure made it impossible to protect him anymore. What's important to understand is this. Matt Lauer didn't operate in a vacuum. He operated within a system that allowed him to. NBC didn't fire him because they suddenly discovered he was a bad person. They fired him because they were forced to. The institution failed at employees long before it held Lauer accountable. And that failure has consequences that extend far beyond one man's career. For the women who accuse him, coming forward came at a cost. Legal battles, social media harassment, professional setbacks. The burden of proof fell on them. They had to prove that Matt Lauer hurt them, while he got to remain silent and hire expensive lawyers to defend himself. The system that failed to protect them initially continued to fail them even after they spoke up. But something changed too. Because of Matt Lauer's fall, NBC implemented new workplace policies. Other networks took sexual harassment more seriously. Women in media felt emboldened to come forward with their own stories. The hashtag #MeToo movement gained momentum. Standards shifted, at least slightly. The bigger truth is this. Matt Lauer's downfall wasn't about one man's misconduct. It was about a reckoning with power itself. It was about institutions being forced to acknowledge that protecting powerful men at the expense of vulnerable women was no longer acceptable. It was about the beginning, just the beginning, of a cultural shift. But the work isn't finished. Even today, powerful men in positions of authority abuse that power. Even today, institutions protect them. Even today, women struggle to be believed. Matt Lauer's story is a cautionary tale, yes, but it's also a story about how much further we still have to go. The real question isn't what happened to Matt Lauer. He's living in exile, silenced by his own choices and his legal agreements. The real question is, what have we learned? And are we willing to build systems that prevent the next Matt Lauer from ever having that kind of power in the first place? That's the work ahead. That's the reckoning that matters.